Good morning. Can you hear me way in the back? If you want to hear me, great. Okay. I trust that you're all wide awake, at least all of you who didn't spend the evening with Kevin Ward. I made the mistake of joining him for a while, and it was rewarding, but this morning I wasn't so sure. It's going to be rough to live up to that introduction, Renee, but I do appreciate it. As Renee mentioned, I will be retiring as CEO of SERRV actually tomorrow at 5 p.m. Thank you. I'm actually somewhat ambivalent about that myself, but I fortunately will be able to continue to do some work with SERRV after that. We have been very fortunate to recruit a new CEO, a woman named Laureen Epp, who I'm sure you will all get to meet at the next conference. Laureen is Canadian, but has lived in the U.S. for the last 20 years, has a background in interior design and merchandising, has been involved in lots of community activities, and actually served on the, and I'm not even supposed to say this word, 10,000 Villages, but she served on the 10,000 Villages Canada board for a number of years. So we feel very fortunate to have her joining us at SERRV. But today I'm still the CEO of SERRV, so I actually would be remiss if I didn't say, go see the SERRV booth. Talk to Sarah and Serena when you have time. I really appreciate you allowing me to take some of the valuable time during this conference today to share a bit of my story. What being part of this community has meant to me, what I think we have accomplished together, and how I see the future opportunities and challenges that we all face. I remember the first conference that I attended. Prior to joining SERRV, I actually was in the investment business. At a point in our lives, my wife and I adopted 2 children, and somebody informed us you needed to have money if you were going to have children. And so I decided I needed to get a real job and became involved in the investment business. So the first conference that I attended, the organization was then called the North American Alternative Trade Organization, or NATO. And we were meeting in 1990 in a park in Madison, Wisconsin. I showed up, having come from the investment business, in my pressed shirt and tie, and saw more tie-dye than I had seen since I attended university in the 60s. So our dress code as fair traders has changed. We all look pretty mainstream today. It's a bit daunting to speak to such a distinguished group as this. Many experienced fair traders, many allied organizations, all of you very creative, committed people. Many of you I've known for long years. Some of you I've known for shorter periods of time, and many of you I know by reputation. As a movement, we've evolved, and we're very fortunate to have many young, energetic people involved. But I think it's important that we do remember some of the pioneers and people who help us to get where we're at today. Many of those pioneers are not with us at this conference today. People like Paul Myers from 10,000 Villages, Jackie McDonald from Bridgehead and the Body Shop Community Trade Program, and Dan Salcedo, founder of Pueblo de People. And some of those pioneers are in the audience today. People like Jonathan Rosenthal, Mac McCoy, Bill Harris, Cheryl Mush, and Jim Getch. My introduction to fair trade, like many in my generation, came through my church, where our Methodist youth group sold SERRV products in our congregation as part of our church's social outreach program. After that, a couple of years in the Peace Corps with my wife Sue, and another year working with Church World Service on a USAID subcontract in Northeast Brazil, really caused me to come to believe that traditional aid just wasn't working, and in fact was often reinforcing dependency and shoring up autocratic and corrupt regimes. I also came to realize that unlike what we believed then as young, naive Americans, most of the people in the world were deprived of even a chance to support their families or secure a reasonably comfortable life, in spite of their willingness to work very hard. Their communities and countries simply did not provide the opportunity for people to improve their lives. Of course, this continues to be the case across the globe today in many, many places. The official unemployment rate in Senegal is 48%. In Kenya, Haiti, and Swaziland, 40%. In the Cameroon, 30%, 27% in South Africa, and even in growing India, over 9%. And these are the official figures, which often underestimate the actual rate of unemployment or underemployment. And in many of those countries, we know that even those people who are employed are working for poverty wages. Inspired by our time in Brazil and a significant amount of naivete, as I mentioned, Sue and I opened our own alternative trade store in the 1970s in Wisconsin. Of course, it was called One World Gifts. And for 2 years, we painfully learned what all of you retailers know. Retail is really, really hard work. And before we closed, we'd accumulated a lot of tax deductions that we actually didn't need at that point in our lives. We became more engaged in the political side of fair trade in the 1980s as my wife, a Central American activist, insisted that we drink pretty mediocre coffee that came from Jim Getch's Friends of the Third World via the Netherlands and Canada, as the U.S. had banned the importation of Nicaraguan coffee. And as Jim and I talked yesterday, that he had found and others a way to work around that ban, but the coffee was barely legal and barely drinkable. But I should be clear, however, that it was not Jim's fault that the coffee was mediocre. After all, it had traveled across the Atlantic for several months and then made its way back through Canada to the U.S. And speaking of Friends of the Third World, I really do want to stop in my story for a second to recognize Jim, who has been a foot soldier and quiet leader in this movement for many, many years. He continues to do the hard work of sticking to his values even when economic pressures push you in another direction. And I don't know, Jim, if you're here, I hope, but maybe we could get you to stand up. When I lived in Brazil, I had the opportunity to meet very briefly Archbishop Dom Alder Câmara. He was a strong advocate of liberation theology. He was known in the 60s and 70s in Brazil as the Bishop of the Poor for his extensive efforts on their behalf and his work to combat the military dictatorship that governed Brazil for more than 20 years. In one of his writings, Don Elder used to arise very early. He was a very humble man, and he would arise early and he would pray and meditate and walk, and he would write in his diary. And many of his writings have now been published, and they're still available. If you're interested, a book called The Desert is Fertile is really a very interesting book, which deals a lot about development issues. In one of his writings, Dom Elder said, "It's difficult to maintain the soul of a Jeep in the body of a Cadillac." I'm afraid I've not been successful in living up to Don Elder's expectations, at least in the literal sense. But I think he was really referring more to our lifestyle than our physical bodies. And I think others, like Jim, have set an example for us in the way their lifestyle is consistent with their fair trade values. I am grateful to these pioneers that I have mentioned and many others who have offered me counsel over the years and who by their example have offered me encouragement and inspiration to continue in this work. Of course, I've also been fortunate to meet many fair trade leaders across the globe, including servant leaders like Dr. Sharma from Tara in India, Winnie Lura in Chile, Giselle Florent in Haiti, Milan Bhattarai in Nepal, Johnny Joseph in Creative Handcrafts, and many, many other artisan leaders who continue to give guidance to this movement. In the early days, we were idealists, preaching the gospel of alternative trade, people before profit. We saw alternative trade as a development strategy which would hopefully lift people out of poverty through their own efforts by providing them with opportunity and a fair playing field. We also sought to make a statement by our example of a different way of doing business, one that showed greater respect for all of the people involved in the supply chain. Our products were often whatever our producer partners had to offer, handmade products produced for use in their own country or for sale to tourists. Our audience and customer base were solidarity buyers, many of them from the religious community, who purchased whatever we had to offer because they believed in the goals of the movement. Many years ago, I was on an airplane flying actually to a Fair Trade Federation conference in Seattle, and started talking to the person next to me. Then the person asked what I did, where I worked, and I really tried to explain what SERRV was about, what fair trade was about, and the person seemed to really struggle to understand. And then finally, kind of a light went off, and they said, oh, you're just like, and they named a fair trade organization that's no longer in business today. And I said, yeah, that's right. We're similar to that organization, and blues. We had the idealism of youth, as many of you do today. Many of us took heart from people like Catholic worker activist Dorothy Day, who said, people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do. Our organizations have grown over the years. Our movement has matured. One could say the movement has moved into middle age and become more cautious, as many of us do as we get older. Though I do realize that many of you are very young and many of your organizations are still very young. In reaction to a challenging marketplace, we have perhaps grown too disdainful of those who were not so good at business, but who were visionaries, who believed in and focused on the core values of the movement. We have certainly moved much closer today to mainstream businesses, adopting many of their assumptions about employee pay and benefits, working conditions, pricing, marketing, branding, and so on. But in spite of that, our sales remain extremely small in comparison to the huge marketplace that is North America. However, I do not think our past success can be measured in sales dollars, nor do I think we should lose heart because some of our colleague organizations have fallen by the wayside, or because some of us struggle with sales that aren't growing as fast as we'd like. When I was a young person, practically no one expected corporations or retailers to worry about ethical or sustainable sourcing, about the environment, or really even about how the employees of the organization were treated. Today, most of us expect businesses we deal with to act in an ethical manner, and we make purchasing decisions, at least sometimes, based on our values. Recent market research does indicate that people will pay a modest premium to buy products from organizations that they believe align with their values. And this should not come as a shock to us to realize that people don't make buying decisions simply based on the way they value the product. After all, for years, we've been paying a premium to buy branded products when we can buy exactly the same generic product for a much lower price. The fair trade movement did not single-handedly bring about this change in the business climate, but we certainly did contribute very significantly to it. The impact of this change, in a way, is a great deal greater than the impact we may have as organizations on reducing poverty. We've led by example. I think we've often failed to realize how successful we've been in leading by example, how often larger businesses now attempt to emulate what we're doing and even use the same language that we use in talking about how their businesses are ethical. And so I think we really do need to take heart in all that's been accomplished in terms of changing the business culture in North America as a result of this movement. But the capitalist system certainly is good at recognizing a winning strategy, and when it sees one, it eventually attempts to co-opt it and modify the concepts in order to take advantage of what they see as messaging that will allow them to increase sales. One of our biggest challenges today is to hold to our core values even when it gets really, really hard. And it is really, really hard right now, at least from the seat that I sit in. SERRV was very fortunate to have a board member a number of years ago named Benton Rhodes. Benton worked for the National Council of Churches, and he was in charge of agricultural projects. He was a good friend and marched with Cesar Chavez. And often when our board got into the weeds, debating our most pressing financial challenges and recent general ledger accounting reports, Benton would remind the board that their role was not to assure that SERRV continued to exist. It was to assure that the organization was true to its values and mission as long as it did exist. I do not mean to oversimplify the challenges we face. I know from daily experience over the last 28 years that the business environment is getting increasingly difficult, particularly for smaller organizations. And I think we all pretty much qualify as smaller organizations in the world of multinationals. We are all confronted on a daily basis with conflicts between financial viability and our values. Yet I also know that the quickest path to oblivion for most of us is in abandoning our mission and values. For after all, there's no way we can compete with Amazon on price and service. So where do I think we go from here? Or perhaps I should say, where do I think you go from here? As I have said, I think we can take heart from the impact that we have had on society and the business community. Consumers increasingly care about where their products come from, how the people are treated who made those products, and what impact the supply chain has had on the environment. But the progress that's been made on this front is in jeopardy. Paying the least amount possible and getting the biggest discount when we shop is not so much a matter of economic necessity for many people as it is a game we play to prove that we are smart consumers. Many of us still don't connect the willingness to pay more for a product with the ability of an organization to actually act ethically and treat their people well. We want to earn more and pay less for what we buy. This obviously doesn't work well in the long run. The same discounting mentality is certainly an increasing problem for all of us in the fair trade world. And as fair traders, I think we've often shot ourselves in the foot by claiming that we can deliver a high-quality product that is fairly sourced and sold under fair trade conditions for the same price as a product that is commercially sourced. This is simply not true if we're actually following all of the fair trade principles and doing what we say we're doing. And increasingly, we face the challenge in the current political environment, in spite of the good work of the Fair Trade Federation, Fair Trade America, and others, of the fact that the term fair trade is now being used in ways that not only are different from our intention, but actually and often are in opposition to what we believe. Fair trade is now being used to close borders, to work for import taxes on imports, but I think we all need to be very, very aware of the danger of this tax that's being proposed on imports into this country. And this is not one particular political party. Actually, yesterday I turned on the news briefly to hear a Democratic senator say, well, we're not willing to work with the president on everything, but we are willing to work with him on fair trade issues. And I'm sure she wasn't talking about our fair trade. In my opinion, the organic movement in America took off when American consumers made it a health issue. They were really not so concerned about the impact of chemicals on farm workers, or even the impact on the environment. But when they decided that their children's health and their own health was perceived to be in stake, shopping and paying more for organic became part of many people's lifestyle. And a key to growing the market for organic was third-party certification. People were not going to go out of their way to find and pay more for organic products without verification that the products they were eating and were using were really free of chemicals. As I said, early fair traders were motivated by charity, altruism, and a thirst for social justice. But this motivation has not been sufficient in the American market to make us a truly mainstream movement. Trade truly benefits them. And until they do, we are unlikely to break out of the niche status we occupy. A growing number of those supporters and customers also express some concerns about our claims and are increasingly skeptical about some of the claims that some ethical and fair trade businesses are making. So how do we convince a broader audience to buy and support fair trade? First, we have to offer a unique, high-quality product and service that is competitive with what is available in the broader marketplace. I think as a movement, we're on this. In the time that I've been in fair trade, we've seen huge, huge improvements in the products that fair traders are offering across the board, and also a much wider variety of products. There's still a huge amount of work to be done in this area, but I think our coffee colleagues, and there are many of them in this room, Level Ground, Peace Coffee, Dean's Beans, Just Coffee, Eco Exchange, and many more, have shown us a really example by offering a really high-quality product that is competitive with any other coffee product in the marketplace. Fair trade products, I hope, are no longer perceived as just low-quality tchotchkes, but I think it's really essential that we all keep working to make sure that whatever we're doing in terms of our messaging, branding, and merchandising is in fact reinforcing the efforts that we as a movement need to make to improve our brand identity and the quality of the product that we offer. And we need to get really better at this very quickly because we work, as I said, in a very challenging marketplace. And we need to be really clear about our values, and I think that we talked a lot about that. We've talked about it yesterday in the membership meeting. I think sometimes we think we're clear about those values, but given the pressures of the day in the marketplace, I think it's essential that on a regular basis, all of us examine the fair trade principles and examine them in terms of our own organizational values and how we operate our businesses on a day-to-day basis. And we need to realize that these fair trade principles are actually pretty radical if you really read them and think about them. I mentioned to you earlier Dom Helder Câmara, this Archbishop from Brazil. He said once, "When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist." The idea that all of the people of the world have an equal right to the resources of the world is actually pretty radical and not really widely accepted in our nation right now. And the idea that trade should not be about power and wealth and about America first, but should be about fairness and equity is also a pretty radical idea. When we water this message down, we avoid alienating people, but I also think we risk losing the passion that motivated earlier fair traders and that can motivate our supporters today. Finally, I think we need to help people see the impact of what we do and the impact of their shopping fair trade. They will need to believe that paying more for a fairly traded product improves the lives of those who made the product and contributes to creating a better future for themselves and their children. And they need to know it not just because we say it, but because we can prove it and demonstrate it. We have to invest more in monitoring impact and telling our story, and we need to do it with authority and authenticity. This will require us to work harder to make sure we are having the impact we desire, to measure that impact, and also it will mean moving, I believe, to third-party certification from organizations like Fair Trade America or the World Fair Trade Organization. Organizations that have a meaningful, reputable monitoring system. There are simply so many companies making so many claims about their ethics in the marketplace today that consumers have the right to demand proof that we are doing what we say we're doing. Finally, I think, and perhaps most importantly, we need to listen to our producer partners and farmer partners. The people who make the products, the people around the globe that are part of this movement but not represented in this room today are really what it's all about. And I think we have to make sure that we are on a continual basis listening to them, hearing what their agenda is, what they need to have happen, and aligning our work with the goals and objectives of our fair trade producer partners. In 2005, in a conference in London, Nelson Mandela said, "Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. While poverty persists, there is no true freedom. The steps that are needed from the developed nations are clear. The first step is ensuring trade justice. I have said before that trade justice is a truly meaningful way for the developed countries to show commitment to bringing about an end to global poverty." So let's continue to build innovative, sustainable businesses that set an example for others in the way business can be done, both profitably and principally. And let's continue to work with the passion for justice that gave birth to this movement many years ago. I continue to be inspired every day that I get to go to work in this movement. When I was a young person growing up in a small community in Wisconsin, I never dreamed that I would get to work with such an exciting, creative group of people as all of you, as well as people across the globe who are all committed to creating a better world. It has been a great privilege for me to be part of this community and a great joy for me. And so, as I said in the beginning, it is with some ambivalence that I step down and look for another role to play in the movement. But I will look forward to seeing how the movement continues to grow in energy and impact, and I will do everything I can to look for new opportunities to be part of it. Thank you very much.